Okay, Max, picture this.
Hmm.
What do a cop, a neurotic school teacher, a concerned parent, and a junkie all have in common?
They're all characters in a movie together?
Nope, wrong. They all went to see Weapons this August, just like everyone else in America. Let's go to the movies. Welcome to Picture This, the podcast where we examine the weekly box office and ask what do movie going trends say about American culture, about our loves, our hates, our curiosities, sometimes about the things we didn't even know about ourselves. Movie going is an American passion, but it's hit uncertain times. So mostly, Max and I are here to give you all the reasons to go see a movie in theaters the way they were meant to be seen.
That's right. I'm Max, a screenwriter and son of an independent movie theater owner.
And I'm Dave. Over the last 10 years, I've worked for a filmmaker, an agent, and at a movie studio and movie marketing. Today's episode, we're going to be talking Weapons, the big success of August. But first, let's talk about the state of the biz, Max.
So, we are recording this coming right off the heels of Labor Day weekend, a 3-day weekend where Americans get the day off. Usually, when you're looking at 3-day weekends on the movie release calendar, that bodes well for the box office. But this weekend, that is not the case. And at first, Dave, I was like, oh man, is this just like a Labor Day dud? Is this an example of the lower box office that we've been feeling this summer? But then I went into past years, and you know what? Labor Day is not much of a movie going day. People are on vacation, people are at barbecues. They're actually not going to the movies. And what we saw is unfortunately there's like a lot of selections in theaters right now. We have the dark rom-com The Roses. We
hmm
have this prime romp called Caught Stealing with some really amazing actors and a big director, Darren Aronofsky. We got the 50th anniversary of Jaws in theaters. We got a small movie called Toxic Avenger. That's a remake of kind of like a B movie classic. We had a Coen Brothers crime adventure called Honey Don't. Plus, we still got Naked Gun, Freakier Friday, Weapons, Nobody 2, Bad Guys 2. We're talking like everything for everyone, including a couple of superhero movies still limping around in theaters. And still, nobody really seemed to want to go out. But it makes sense. That's just not what people do on Labor Day.
Yeah, Max, it's so crazy. And I swear where the phrase dog days of summer get. It's like right at the end of summer. And you'd think everything you'd want in theaters, people would show up for it. But like you said, historically, like Labor Day, people just don't end up going to the theaters. And that's different from Memorial Day weekend. It's different from July 4th. These are all other major US holidays where studios will plan giant releases around them. And for some reason, the studios have learned that like it's hard for people to show up around this time.
Yeah, and do we feel like they dump movies on Labor Day? Movies that they're not expecting to have a certain turnout?
Max, it's funny you asked. I'm going to give you guys a deep dive just about my experience on the release calendar and where movies get placed. And we can talk about it. There's no firm answer, Max, is cutting to the end of it. But you definitely pulled out some interesting nuggets from this last week or two that the overall, the box office was an odd weekend, a relatively low weekend.
Well, yeah. So coming off of this weird time in the movie release calendar, we did see something really interesting
Yeah.
as a marketing ploy. And like you're a marketing guy, so I kind of want to know what you thought about this. But there was a remake of this movie called The Toxic Avenger. Like I said, it was a trauma film from the 80s. It was a cult classic. Just gore, nudity, bad acting, like you name it. It wasn't a Roger Corman movie. It was a Lloyd Kaufman movie. For those of you who don't know who either of those guys are, essentially, they just made movies on the cheap and used to release them in drive-ins or straight to video or stuff like that. They'd make like $1 million movies and they'd make a little bit of money.
I love that. And oftentimes from cinephile snobs, which I think Max and we are kind of part of that culture too, where we love to talk about fancy pants movies. But a lot of the history of movies are built on just people not trying to make art, but just trying to make a buck. And
Yeah.
that's kind of what Roger Corman was all about, wasn't he?
And it also just says a lot about, I mean, we're here to talk about American culture, right? And it says a lot about American culture that so much of these movies were made and that they made money and that a lot of
Mhm.
people went to go see them. And anyhow, they remade Toxic Avenger because it is this kind of cult classic and they wanted to still have fun with it, but they also took it a lot more seriously. They cast Peter Dinklage as the Toxic Avenger.
Ooh.
The whole premise of it is that this guy gets toxic waste spilt on him and he kind of turns into an unlikely superhero. But a lot of what's wrapped up, as I understand, in the plot of this version of Toxic Avenger is that he is burdened by medical debt, something that a lot of Americans are going through right now. People who are poor simply because they had to go to the doctor. So, as a marketing ploy, they teamed up with Bloody Disgusting and a few other like horror promotion venues, and they partnered with this nonprofit called Undo Medical Debt. And on the release this weekend of the movie, they are going to get rid of $5 million in medical debt that gets erased no matter what for folks who are overburdened by it. And for every $1 million the movie makes at the box office, Undo Medical Debt is going to erase another million in medical debt. It's going to go up in toxic smoke. And I thought that was
Wow.
really cool.
That is so cool. That's such a great idea, and I think just another snapshot of how at this moment there are a lot of opportunities outside of the major studios to hopefully have success. All right, so I'm going to talk about the release schedule in movie theaters because I think it's just fun things to keep in your head as you're finding yourself in certain months where you're like, why haven't I been into the theaters in a while? And then there's certain months where you're like, why are there 3 movies that I want to see in theaters and I can't see them all? I think it's a really interesting process. Again, I worked at marketing at a studio for about 10 years, and there's a whole division of people that they literally just sit around a room and look at dates on your calendar. There's still people just looking at a calendar trying to decide a good date to release a movie.
The challenge of that is like there's always a reason not to release something on any given day in the year. And trying to find a date where there are more pluses than minuses here just feels like the most impossible job.
It's surprisingly so hard, and I really feel for the people that are trying to do this. So this is kind of business 101. If you're a businessman and you're trying to put a product out to the market, you want to do it at a time where it's the most available to your widest audience, but is also as far away from your competitors. And that holds true when it comes to movies, is that studios want to find a time to put their movie on a release date where there's nothing else quite like it, but everyone's available to see it. And of course, the reality of it, that's never the case.
Especially as they make films that are so similar to one another. But yeah.
Exactly. So, okay, with that idea in mind of where there's the most opportunity for an audience and the least amount of competition, it's a super formal a process of claiming a date to release a movie, which is a couple guys sit around a conference table and then they use the rule of shotgun, which is like just claiming the date, which sounds so dumb. You think it would be way more advanced than that. And yes, there are plenty of metrics and statistics, but every couple times a year, you'll hear in the movie trades that Disney is going to release a movie on June 29th in 2028. And they will just like claim a date in 3 years and say, untitled Star Wars movie. It's a lot of studios just like claiming dates and then other studios reacting to those claimed dates and saying like, well, I don't want to release a movie around that untitled Star Wars movie. I'll
Right.
pick a date that's later.
I don't want to go up against a Marvel movie.
Exactly. So that's roughly the process. And I do think it's funny at how rudimentary it might come across. But take a step back as a moviegoer, and we're just going to go through the calendar year. And let's start in mid September. Mid September to about mid November. In theaters, typically, you'll find more serious mainstream movies. You'll find your R-rated movies that aren't horror, that are maybe
Mm.
like deemed important and for adult audiences, as well as because this also coincides with Halloween. This is also where you will see a lot of R-rated horror movies.
Yeah.
So in general, September gets the reputation, September, October, November, to be like important and darker movies. This also coincides when there's a bunch of movie festivals that happen in September. The Venice Film Festival happens, the Toronto International Film Festival happens, Telluride happens, New York Film Festival happens. So
Mm.
those are all opportunities for movies to get critics to view it and to get them to start writing about it and then hopefully get seeded into the cultural zeitgeist before the studio then releases it. Then cut to mid-November, we're around Thanksgiving. Usually there's time for one big broad release. Last year it was Wicked. This year it's going to be another Wicked. Every studio will claim this date around the holidays as an important time because when people have days off, that is another opportunity of your audience is more available than they usually are. So let's give them some content to go see.
Yeah, and like a big broad movie that we could try and get a lot of people to come out and go see and generate some word of mouth about for sure.
Yeah, but in that September up until November window, as an example, this year we're going to have Paul Thomas Anderson's next movie. We're going to have Yorgos Lanthimos' movie with Emma Stone called Begonia. So that is the September through November window. November comes Thanksgiving, and usually there's a big broad release like a Wicked. Post Thanksgiving, you start to see some more awardsy, Oscar-y types of movies that get released in that window. And then there's another big opportunity, which is between Christmas and New Year's, especially in the US. It is a week where everyone typically has more free time. And this is an opportunity where studios claim that people in this window are willing to see more than one movie that week. And that is very rare for your average moviegoer. So there are many movies that are released in this window vying not to be the first movie on your mind, Max, but to just be movie 2 or 3. And if you can claim the third spot of the movie that someone's going to see on December 29th, some studios are like, yes, that's a win.
Yeah, well, because it could mean $100 million. Like if the most interesting choice on this in the last few years, I think was Nosferatu.
Yes.
Which you would think was an like literally any other time than like the most wonderful time of the year type of film to go see. Just this weird, dark vampire movie with weird nudity in it, and that movie fucking crushed. It made a ton of money because it was probably the second or third movie that people wanted to go see during that time.
Absolutely, Max. And that's a great example of counter programming
Yeah,
actually working.
yeah,
Then comes January, and the start of the year is typically not a great time at the box office.
dude. This last year, I asked a buddy if he wanted to go see a movie in January, and he was like, "I don't trust any movie that's dumped in the killing fields of January."
It sounds like your friend is also has kind of a feel for when movies should be released.
He's
And
been in the biz for a while, so
so January through almost February is what a lot of people consider as movie dumping grounds, where it's like movies that are trying something interesting and unique and maybe will have an audience, but probably not really will be released in January. It's a cold time of the year. A lot of people are in the mood to hibernate, especially now with streaming. It's just much more appealing to stay home and to put something on your TV. Oftentimes this is also when some of the Oscar-y movies of the previous year are being released on streaming. So a lot of people are catching up on those.
we're all trying to see as many of them as possible.
Yes, exactly. Before the Oscars actually happen in March. And occasionally you'll get a big release on Martin Luther King Day because that's one extra day that an audience is available. So occasionally you'll see a movie get released at that window. But in general, people avoid this time to release movies. But an exception to that rule is a movie like Megan was released on
Mhm.
January 6th and absolutely crushed. And it was not really expected and greatly overperformed. So, in these quiet windows, there's certain films that hit their cultural zeitgeist different than you thought and really explode. Then you get to February. Now, more and more in the last couple of years, studios try to program around major holidays like Valentine's Day,
Yeah.
especially because Valentine's Day, most people, you're looking for some sort of like date movie, something to do with their significant others.
Yeah, we need to lift our spirits up, and being romantic is a good. It's a gray, sad month, and a great whoever came up with the Valentine's Day marketing ploy. I think they must have had that in mind because like we all need something to lift us up.
Absolutely. And Galentine's Day has also become a thing. And this past year, there a movie like Love Hurts and Hard Eyes, two movies that I think most critics would deem not very good, but both of them were almost programmed exactly around the idea of love and Valentine's Day.
Wasn't 50 Shades of Grey famously released around Valentine's Day and
Yeah, absolutely, and drew
yeah,
huge audiences,
huge
huge,
audiences?
huge. And now March, April comes around, and more now studios are trying to claim that's kind of the summer. What it really is spring break around this time, and these people that are picking the dates do try to game the system on dates where the most amount of either college kids or elementary kids are out of school. And you could find that this past year in Minecraft releasing in early April,
Yeah,
and
and
doing over a
being I
billion
think it's
dollars.
still the number one domestic movie of the year, right?
It's unbelievable. Yeah,
Yeah.
and it just crushed. But also, you have movies that I think were really interesting not do really well. Movie like Mickey 17 and Black Bag, two movies that were made by auteur filmmakers
Yeah.
with movie stars in it and were well made. Studios released it at this time thinking they would have an opportunity to have people show up, and they underperformed, which is a real
Yeah.
bummer.
I mean, Black Bag, I think to your point, actually might have done extremely well in September if they had released it then. But who knows? Like, I think March is interesting. March and April becoming bigger months used to not be a thing. It seems like the more that studios make huge tentpole $200 million films, there just isn't enough room in the calendar to put them all in May, June, July, right?
Exactly. And that's really what we're getting at, which is that window. This is funny to talk about it this weekend because Jaws was just re released and its 50th anniversary. But many people point to the release of Jaws in 1975 to start what is called the summer blockbuster period, which
Yeah,
is May through June and July, slightly into August. But those are the dates that the most people are available. Their children are out of school, people are on vacation and willing to see big splashy content. And those are the dates typically that if a studio head is trying to claim a date for a major film, they are either looking in the May through July window or what we had just mentioned, that December window. If you look at all the Spider-Man movies, they are either released in the heart of summer. And then
right.
I think one year, I think because of post COVID, the No Way Home film was released at Christmas. And that was the only time because Sony knew it was their top priority. They wanted to make sure that the audience was as available as possible.
Yeah,
And they
well,
came in
also,
the
like,
days.
Spider-Man is, like, it's one of those 5 titles or something like it's like a Jurassic Park movie. You just don't go up against Spider-Man. I
Yes.
don't care if you're Iron Man.
Yeah,
Like, you
exactly.
don't like, Spider-Man is so reliable, the box office is kind of unbelievable, and Jurassic Park is the same way, and that's why they usually July 4th weekend on most Jurassic Park movies. But one of the things that changed March, I do wanna say this, what I
Yeah.
think why we're seeing Minecraft or even, like, Disney trying to put out Snow White,
Yeah.
the movie that changed the March release was, do you know what it is?
Tell me, Max.
The Matrix.
Oh, that's right. That's
Yeah, when The
right. Yeah.
Matrix came out in '99, it was this huge surprise hit, and it carried for weeks and weeks, and suddenly studios were like, "Oh my god, we can release a tentpole movie in the spring, and they can make a bunch of money," and year after that, they started getting pushed back further and further.
It's another testament to like these flows that I'm walking you through the calendar, they're all man-made. Maybe there's an opportunity to change them in the future. And anyway, so through the May, June, July period of major blockbusters, that included Mission Impossible, Superman, Fantastic Four, the F1 movie, also the Jurassic movie. So that those all fit into the tentpole most important needing to make the most money properties for the studios on that window. And then we get to August. And this is what I think is so interesting is that August is always just a weird time at the movies.
Sometimes it works, but a lot of times it really doesn't.
It's up with January where it's like it could be the dregs, but I think if you look back on years, you usually find like one winner, one interesting piece in August. I think the perception that I took away from my time at a studio is that after the onslaught of May, June, July, and what is right now a lot of IP driven fare and a lot of like established brands, and to what Max just said, like now that's even extended to, oh man, it fucking starts in March. So it's March, April, May, June, July. And then we're talking movies like Minecraft based on a video game, Jurassic World based on 9 other movies, Mission Impossible based on 7 other movies, Superman based on 7 other movies. Like, so audiences are going to these movies, but are they just inundated with familiar properties? And August comes around, and maybe these audiences are interested in something a little different. And last year, that can be reflected in a movie called It Ends With Us. But then also last year, you had a movie like Borderlands, which was a much troubled production, but it had Kate Blanchett and Kevin Hart in it,
And Jack
like
Black, dude,
and
like,
Jack Black
it
in
should
it,
have been, and it was based on a hugely popular video game. It seemed like such a sure bet, but it was just it did not work,
and it just
sadly.
didn't work. And then looking back at 2022, a movie like Bullet Train, okay, it did have Brad Pitt in it, but it was also Brad Pitt being a little kooky and a very unusual filmmaking and action, but kind of playful. And that made over $100 million domestically. But then also the guy that made Mad Max Fury Road, they released a movie called 3,000 Years of Longing, which was a really like strange movie and it kind of defied genre. And they kind of didn't
Oh,
know where to put
man.
it. So they like threw it in August.
Dude, it
So
was so good and some of the best filmmaking I've ever seen. It got killed by a weird response. I don't know. I have opinions about that. But
yeah,
if you're a fan of George Miller and you like the Mad Max movies, go see that. It's a really cool love story and it's very magical. It's like a fairy tale. It's rad.
I agree. Well, you know what I say from a person who's a marketer? That
Hmm.
is a terrible title. just an awful kid. Like, w could you I think I fall asleep before I finish saying the title. 3,000 years of love.
How
And it's
long
just
how
like,
long
oh,
do you wanna be sitting in this movie theater?
exact
3,000 years? Oh, fuck, I didn't even think about that.
but I think it brings us to what we really wanna talk about today, which is weapons.
Yeah, weapons. Let's get into our non-spoiler section, starting with our ultimate log lines. Dave, 10 words or less, what is this movie about?
In a small American town, missing kids make for weird adults.
Oh, that's interesting. It's over 10 words, but I think it's good.
Okay, I think it's 11. I think you're right. What do you
Well,
got, Max?
I'm taking a page. I'm taking a page out of Dave's logline haikus. So here's mine. Kids disappear. Very sad. Town goes bloody crazy. Extremely bloody.
I prefer the haiku methods. Maybe we should try
Oh
doing that
man,
in the
I
future.
think it
Okay.
depends. I think to both of our points is this movie's actually there's a lot that goes on in it. Before spoiling anything, it's really just best understood as kind of the hook, which is that when every kid from one third grade classroom at an elementary school runs away in the middle of the night at the exact same time, disappearing, the town centers their suspicion on the child's teacher. But we soon learn more about this small town, and a few important citizens reveal that there's much more going on in this mysterious story.
It was directed by this guy named Zach Kreger, who was a former actor.
Well, he was in The Whitest Kids You Know.
Oh, God, amazing! That's right. Just an amazing comedian.
Yeah, so like
Yeah.
those years and years and years doing sketch comedy, following this trend started by Jordan Peele of famous successful comedians turning to the horror genre to make very serious horror films. I don't know what it is about those two things, but they're fucking working out great. And like, let's just keep it rolling, man.
Agreed, man. Agreed. I'd forgotten. I knew he was an actor, but I forgot he was like a legendary sketch comedy guy.
Yeah,
But really, he hit the map as a director to note with the release of a movie called Barbarian,
an
which
awesome movie.
so cool, so original. Again, similar to Weapons, where it was a horror movie, original storytelling, not based on any IP, exploring interesting characters outside of the genre of horror, as
Yeah.
well as using horror genre tropes too. The cast also quickly of Weapons is just an incredible cast. They got Josh Brolin, Julia Gardner, Alden Ehrenreich. I don't know if there's a single star in this like a Brad Pitt or
Nope.
a Tom Cruise.
When Brolin is your biggest guy, you have a cast of really awesome character actors. I mean, Benedict Wong.
Yeah, oh, amazing. Of course, Benedict Wong, who again is another one that like everyone knows his face, and I don't know if everyone knows his name.
They used to make a lot of movies like this where you just stack it with really talented character actors. And lo and behold, when you stack a movie with a bunch of amazing actors who, are playing very specific roles, it turns out to be pretty awesome.
Before you get into box office, this bleeds a little into the marketing, which is okay.
Mhm.
You got some great character actors, maybe a name like a Josh Brolin that you'd recognize. Maybe you'd recognize Julia Gardner from a show like Ozark or
Right.
Benedict Wong. But this
Yeah.
did feel like a movie that was really sold on the concept.
Dude, brilliantly sold on the concept because all I saw was the poster and the trailer. And there's kind of a thought process now, I feel like, in trailer making where before a trailer starts, if you watch it on YouTube, they show you a trailer for the trailer. We're competing so much for attention. We have to throw a bunch of stuff at you all at once. We have to catch your attention and get you hooked. And a lot of trailers will show you the whole movie and all the interesting things about it and just the trailer just to convince you to go, which is a strategy that has never worked ever in the history of film. Audience have always complained about it and always used it as an excuse to not go see the movie if you tell the whole movie in the trailer, but still we're doing it more and more and more. And what Weapons did that was really smart is it just told you the hook that happens at the beginning of the film, which is it opens up on these kids running out of the house with their arms spread in this like T shape, and it's really weird and it's creepy. And then you see a bunch of the actors in the movie and a bunch of the characters, and they're all really fucked up by the situation. And the whole thing is like, we don't know why these kids did this. Why did this happen? So they put this question in your head: why did all these kids leave? And there's a few flashes of some really scary stuff, so you know that you're going to see a scary movie, and then that's it. And then at the end of the trailer, and you're like, what happened to these kids? I want to know what happened. And then the poster did the same thing. It's just the kids running out of the house. And you're like, why the fuck is this titled Weapons?
And I think I had a similar experience with the marketing. Just saw the teaser and the trailer and some of the posters that leaned into the iconography of these little kids running in this unusual style, and the copy, which this isn't really a spoiler, but the same copy that is in the trailer is in the very beginning of the movie and just sets up the exact premise that Max just shared. And the marketing campaign is all based around the why. And so those were, unlike other campaigns, I am going to be talking about Sinners a bit because I see some parallels to this movie, but unlike other campaigns, those were the main marketing materials that I saw, and I didn't need much more.
I feel like America didn't need much more. I mean, for some of us who like the inside baseball stuff, there was a lot of chatter around how this movie got put together. Evidently, Jordan Peele put out a huge bid on it, and the movie ended up selling somewhere else. And Zach Krager got like $20 million to write, direct, and produce this movie, which is like an insane amount of money for a writer director to get. And part of why the budget was higher than normal average horror film. But Jordan Peele was so upset by it that he fired his entire team, all of his representation.
Yeah, he fired his team because he's a Universal, but it ended up at Warner Brothers. And Warner Brothers, also like Sinners, overpaid for this property. They paid a lot of money for this property. And Max, from a box office perspective, did it pay off?
It's like they had like a crystal ball because
Mhm.
immediately it paid off. Like immediately. Opening weekend, 43 million, which it's not the biggest by any stretch of the imagination, but it's a big opening, especially in August. It ended up with a $38 million budget, which is high, but its
Mhm.
marketing campaign, I don't think it was that expensive.
I don't know if they did a good amount of materials for it, but I think nothing outlandish. I think they knew the sell was to just ask the question, and they did it so efficiently and effectively with the teaser. And they used that teaser opening also with the trailer. You learned a little bit more about the characters in the movie, but not much. And
Yeah.
then the outdoor billboards that you saw around town, it was just a picture of those creepy kids and the copy, like these kids left in the middle of the night. And find out why by buying a ticket. That was the promise.
Brilliant. So, and because it was good and because people are liking it, the audience scores in this movie are very high. It had a lot of subsequent weeks with just great business.
Yep.
Aside from just doing business Monday through Friday, the second weekend it did another $24.5 million, which is a 44% drop from weekend one, which, as we've established in previous episodes, a 40% drop is very great. The
Mhm.
third weekend, it dropped 37% and got another 15 million in there. It
Wow.
was technically under K-pop Demon Hunters, but still a really amazing weekend for a movie in its third week. And then including Labor Day, around $12 million, which is only a 20 or 30% drop again.
Yeah.
Worldwide, it has $100 million, but it's
Wow.
crossed 135 domestic. That's a massive hit for a $38 million movie where there wasn't a huge marketing spend. Now, if we're talking about total ticket sales, it's the average American movie ticket is somewhere between $11 and $16. So who knows what it actually is. But we're talking about between 8.5 and 12 million tickets sold. I'm sure people have gone to see this twice, but I don't think it's like K-pop Demon Hunters where kids are just watching it over and over again.
Yeah.
So we're talking about, somewhere between 2.5 and 3% of the entire US population has gone to see this movie. That's pretty impressive. They say if just 2% of the American population gets involved in a political cause, you can shift the entire nation.
Interesting how you phrase that. All right. Well, dude, Matt, let's do it. Let's get into the spoilers.
All right, yeah, let's do it, Dave. I think I'll go ahead and start as the podcast's resident grumpy critic. And I'll start by saying that I loved this movie.
Yes.
You had, I think, you mentioned it a few episodes ago, one of your best movie theater going experiences. I saw it 4 weeks into the release, so it was not a full theater, but it was crazy because it was about 10 different people in the theater, all very different people from very different walks of life, much like the characters in the film.
Yep.
And we all had extreme reactions, vocal reactions to it. You could kind of feel other people's energy, and it was electric. It was super fun. And I think part of why it was so successful is because it had a very interesting storytelling technique to keep piling on the question of why did this happen? Why is what I'm currently watching happening? How is this happening? What is going on? It was just one question after another, after another, after another. And I was just leaning in and leaning in and leaning in. It was super cool.
That's great, man. I'm so glad you had such a good time and enjoyed it and not going to bring us down in this glorious
Yeah.
podcast.
How mad at me would you be right now if I told you that I hated this film?
No, man, I think it's part of it. It makes these conversations that much sweeter that
Right.
you also dug it. So
Well, do
that's
you want
so
to
great.
remind us a little bit, like, about the just super quick about your theater going experience and what you liked about the film so much?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. I also, Max, I loved it. It was an all-time theater going experience for me. I saw it on opening weekend in a packed house. I also convinced my wife and sister-in-law, who are typically not horror moviegoer people. I think a lot of moviegoers did a version of that. And the theater was great in that it was filled with laughter and some of the social commentary, socially uncomfortable moments. There was plenty of senses of dread and dream sequences that everyone was holding their breath. And then, of course, there were some exaltative moments where shit just went fucking crazy and people were just raucousing, yelling, whooping, hooting, and hollering.
Yeah, that final that there's a final I don't want to give away the ending, even though this is the spoiler section, but there's like the final, I guess you would call it showdown in the end, and it's like a chase sequence. And I was like, I felt like I was out of my seat. I think I
Yeah.
was cheering and clapping, and it's like, dude, there was 10 people in this theater. It's a second round.
I
I
guess,
thought,
Max, why don't you do a quick deep dive into plot because we
yeah,
can spoil a bit of it. You can unpack some of the reasons you loved it.
yeah. It's not that we haven't seen a story told this way, but it was a very unique way and non-traditional for movies, but a very traditional way for novels. This movie felt like a novel, and the reason why was it started out and it told you right off the bat in exposition one night at 2:17 in the morning, 17 kids walked out of their front door and disappeared. Nobody's ever seen them again, and we don't know why. And immediately cuts to like a title card of the teacher's name, the teacher of the classroom. And then for the next 20 minutes or so, you experience with that teacher what is going on in her life. And one of the ways that the director, that Krager, like really made us feel like we're experiencing what she's experiencing is the camera was constantly behind the main character. And as they walked from their car to their classroom to their house to the liquor store, whatever, we were following them. We were in their footsteps, literally. We put yourself in somebody else's shoes. We're in their shoes, walking the walk that they have to walk. And I thought that was a brilliant choice. So we're with the teacher. All the parents are really mad at her. She can't go back and teach because it's not safe for her. She's self medicating with alcohol. People are vandalizing her car. We know because we're in her shoes that she is not responsible for this, but she is getting blamed for it. Oh, that's terrible. About 20 minutes later, suddenly we're not in her story anymore. We switch to one of the parents and we go back in time. We don't start off where we left off with the teacher. We start off with the father and now kind of dealing with the fallout of not knowing what the hell happened with his son. Or with him for a while, and he's trying to investigate and he's finding out things that the teacher doesn't know. So we as audience members are privy to a bunch of information that these other characters who are intimately tied in the story don't know. So we know things that they don't know. This is classic dramatic irony. It's what Hitchcock used all the time. It's like classic Rear Window, right? We're all sitting
Yeah.
there in the rear window watching the killer go from apartment to apartment. Is Grace Kelly safe? But it doesn't stop there. We go from that concerned parent, then we go to a police officer who had an affair with the teacher, and then we go to a junkie that the police officer arrested and physically assaulted, and then we go to the principal. And then finally, I don't know, what was it, like halfway through the film, maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less. Finally, we meet the actual antagonist of the film, like
Yeah.
the villain of the film. And we kind of realize that all these people are revolving around her, like spokes in a bicycle wheel, and how they're not out of the danger just because these kids are gone. Suddenly, like the danger is increasing, but only we know that. The characters don't know that, and they don't know how or why, and we know all how and why. And we're like, oh, don't go into that room, don't go do that thing, don't go into that house.
I think one of the reasons I love this is a movie and it includes the marketing campaign where it gets people into the movie for the plot, but what gets people excited about the movie is the story.
Yeah,
And the plot is these kids leave in the middle of the night at the same time and and the question of why. But the movie itself, once your butt is in the seat, is in many ways it's a drama from learning about all these different characters and their perspectives and their struggles.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost not even a horror film until halfway through the movie. There are a couple jump scares and stuff, but that's what's so you're right on the money. It's like a character drama, and we meet like 6 or 7 different characters. And for some reason, that's more engaging than this crazy thing that happened.
Ultimate credit to Zach Kreger, the director, to structure a movie this way, where it's like, I'm going to give people something that is plot interesting enough. And again, in the film, they give the voiceover of what the plot is that you hear in the trailer about these kids leaving. You get that in the first 4 minutes of the movie. But what the majority of the movie is, like Max said, is like learning about these characters' perspective. And as you go through the chapters, you do learn a little bit more of the murder mystery. So the audience is rewarded for trying to solve this ultimate puzzle. But really, what you're getting you're getting this tormented teacher and her unique drinking problem because she's being like chased and abused by the town because of what just happened. You get a snapshot of Brolin and his distraughtness for his son, but also like he's got some of his own family and work problems that he's not dealing
Mhm.
with. You get a snapshot of this cop, and at first you're supposed to admire him, and then you realize he's kind of a dipshit in certain ways. So I think like the rounding of the characters was ultimately like what I so enjoyed about it. Kreger, the director, still finds a way to like create plenty of dread throughout and mystery, so you're still on the edge of your seat. But like I think I remember the characters even more than the scares.
Yeah,
Um,
for sure.
and so these types of movies I so appreciate. I had mentioned I would bring up Sinners again. There is a similar thing that Ryan Coogler did with that movie, where it's like the plot is, oh, this is a vampire movie that takes place in the Old South, but the story is about these two brothers and this small town, and it's about commerce in the South and racism and what it's like to follow your dreams and creativity and all that
Mhm.
stuff. All that shit, it's really hard to put on a movie poster and a movie
Yeah.
trailer.
So just don't do it. Like,
Yes, and
just do the hooky part and then get people in, and then you can talk about whatever you want. People are in the seats.
I think to the Warner Brothers marketing department's credit, this is such a specific side note, but I easily could have seen a marketing campaign where they tried to do that in marketing materials leading up to. They like there's a version of that campaign that I maybe could have even agreed with, where like they did a snapshot of the Brolin parent character, and you could do a 30-second spot on like, hey, what was his perspective, or what was the teacher's perspective. That would also kind of create a mystery, but you also just didn't need it. You had the audience excited just about what this overall mystery is, and then the reward is that you, as an audience member, you buy your ticket, you sit down, you get to discover all these characters and their angst and their own neurosis and their own, and maybe this is a good tie-in to talk about the themes. They're the scaredness of a small town losing their kids.
Yeah, so I thought the idea behind the film was so brilliant is that when a tragedy strikes a community, everyone in the community is affected.
Yeah.
And that's why it was so effective to show the perspective from multiple people and not just one main protagonist, because these people are affected and they're affected forever. They're never the same. So it's following certain people through that tragedy. I think that was totally the right choice. Fully putting us in their point of view, living their pain and consequences was awesome. And what was so great about the screenplay was that every choice someone made had consequences that affected the other characters, whether or not they knew it. And that in turn changed the events of the rest of the film, which means all of the screen time mattered. I call this the opposite of Superman. Just sticking a knife in there one last time. But yeah, like everything a character did is exactly what you would have believed that they would have done, whether or not it was the right choice, the wrong choice, a moral choice, somewhere in between. Like, the teacher's drinking in the bar, and you're like, the cop walks in, he's like, should you really be doing that? We're all thinking that. But
Yeah.
we're also just like, I understand why you're having a drink right now. Your fucking life sucks. And for the most part, like at the same time, even though I knew it was so clear who these characters were and what they wanted, I couldn't actually predict what they were going to do or how they were going to react to certain situations, which means I couldn't predict the outcome of every scene, which made it more and more like, oh my God, what's going to happen? Why are you doing this? How are you going to do this? And why? And I was just constantly hoping that the characters were going to be okay, even when I knew that they weren't going to be. So I thought it was tonally super spot on. The dread of a community experiencing a tragedy and all of the different people trying to just find their way through it. I thought they really nailed that. And I think that, whatever faults you find in this movie, and I have a few, but
Yeah.
like whatever faults you have in this movie, it doesn't matter because the people in it were so real that whatever crazy situation you got them into, it was like, I'm with you in this story.
Also, just another side note, finding moments for it to be really funny. 'Cause again,
Yeah.
it's a horror movie, it's a drama, but like there were moments where we were definitely, the audience I was in was laughing out loud because of either like a dumb choice that the character made purposefully or accidentally.
The reason why is because like every choice the characters were making, you believed. So you could have them do something funny. It didn't matter. Tonally, we were still in the same film. And that's just like the control in the writing and the control in the directing and the control of the performances by the great cast. It was, yeah, everybody crushed it.
We try not to make this podcast too political, Max, but
Can't not talk about politics in this movie.
there are clear themes and analogies to tragedies that are happening in American schools right now. Though the mystery in the middle of this is about kids leaving a class, there's obviously analogies to gun violence and violence in school and how that affects towns. And I think the marketing campaign, and this is maybe kind of sad to say this, but I've been in rooms with other controversial movies where like they don't really bring it up specifically. They don't talk about it at all explicitly. They just, and I don't know if audience members even totally clock what it's regarding, even though I think it's kind of obvious. But a missing classroom the morning of school and a town distraught to me just like really resonated.
I'm gonna blend this a little bit with like why we think America went to go see this movie and why
Yeah.
they liked it. Because I think you just can't not talk about the themes in that. And I think when I saw the trailer about a movie called Weapons,
Yeah.
and it was about kids in a elementary school classroom just being gone, I felt school shooting, even if I was like, it feels like this movie's not about a school shooting. I think in that way, it was successful in its marketing because it was talking about something that we just have trouble talking about in this country. Also, you're not going to get people to come and do a movie if you're like, hey, this is about murdering kids. Like it's just not. We're none of us are gonna. It's too fucking sad.
Yeah.
But so trying to find a roundabout way to, if not make a movie about school shootings, make a movie about what it feels like and what it does to a community. I thought it was very smart. However, my big criticism of this film was I think thematically it's actually kind of a fucking mess.
Okay, let's do it. Let's negatives, hot takes, and we're now in deep spoiler because Max, I do kind of
Yeah,
want to get to the end of it.
yeah.
So, all right,
Okay.
so go on why you love it, but it's a mess.
Okay, so it's only a mess thematically. I think
Mhm.
actually as a story, it's spot on again, and that all has to do with characters making the choices they make and all that other stuff. But thematically, the things that it's trying to explore and talk about, kids disappear. Brolin's character has a dream. There's a giant gun in the sky, an assault weapon,
Yeah.
and the number 217. Do you know why 217 is significant?
Why?
Okay, so I didn't either, and I have to apologize to a friend of mine, but he wrote his letterbox. He's one of my favorite just movie minds, and in his letterbox review, he had some issues with the movie. And some European guy was like, "Hey man, like why you? I think you're reading into this a little bit too much. I don't really think it's that much about school shootings." And my buddy was like, "Yo, 217 is the number of votes that the bill to ban assault rifles after Sandy Hook got in order for it not to proceed to the Senate."
Whoa.
So there's a reason why these kids disappear at 217. There's a reason why there's an assault rifle in the sky
Hmm.
with that number on it. And it's like, you can't say this movie's not about school shootings because it obviously has to be. And that was in the original screenplay. That wasn't a note by the studio or anything like that. That's something Krager really wanted to put in. So you're like, yeah, okay. He was trying to make a movie about school shootings, but then like what happens in the movie? We meet the antagonist, and who's the antagonist? Somebody's weird aunt with like a wig. Somebody's quirky aunt. Who are the people who are most responsible for mass shootings in our country? Well, is it the cast of the Golden Girls, or is it fucking young men who are fucking mad and mentally ill? So why is the antagonist of this film a woman at all? There's all this like, you hear stuff in the background in the TV about like, parasites that infect ants' brains. and make them do things that they don't want to do. And I was like, okay, so I'm like halfway through this movie. I'm like, okay, so we're veering away from the school shooting stuff. We're now talking about how this person is a parasite. Essentially, we find that she's casting a spell on them when we get to the perspective of the little kid who survived, the one little kid who didn't disappear. She turns them into weapons of
Yeah.
her that she can sick on other people. And they attack people, but she also, all the kids come to her house. They're in her basement, and you're like, well, what are they doing there? Because it doesn't really feel like she's draining their life force, but this whole thing about how she's sick and she needs them.
Yeah.
But like that doesn't really, you don't see her kind of change health wise. There's like one scene where she's on the floor coughing, but she kind of looks the same as she did before and afterwards. So you're like, I don't know what she's getting from this or why she needs to do it. She clearly needs to. And I don't know if I necessarily needed an answer to that question, but suddenly we're in a very different place than school shootings. Yeah, so thematically I just think it kind of falls apart, and I wasn't as perturbed by this, but my buddy, he is the same in Barbarian, where Barbarian was a movie about how a man traps women in the basement of his house, which is something that has happened in real life many times. Weirdly, it's its own weird phenomenon. But the monster that they were running away from in Barbarian was another deformed woman.
Hmm.
And it was like, but the women aren't the ones committing, the women aren't the ones locking people in their basements the way like men are. So it's just kind of, it's strange. It's strange for it to pop up in both films, and kind of like, why is the evil witch the ultimate bad guy in these films for him?
This is all the way into my hot take on this, which is we mentioned like plot versus story and how the plot is really what the marketing was all about and the first 5 minutes of it. And my hot take is like the plot actually is a little disappointing, and I think it's another fascination of marketing in general, because like if you answered the question in marketing, this movie would totally fucking bomb. Spoiler, spoiler, spoiler. If we can set an alarm for spoilers. But ultimately, the plot of this movie is at 217, a bunch of kids left their house to disappear. Why? Because a witch with a weird broom and hair stuff.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah, it is like, it's the really really rare case where usually you're like, wow, that movie wasn't good, but the action sequences kept me engaged, or the plot of the movie kept me engaged. And this is the super rare case where it's like, wow, all of the characters were so interesting, engaging, and they made such thrilling choices, but man, that plot didn't make any sense. It's like, what other movie is like that? I can't even think of one.
I agree. And I think Max and I are both examples. I mean, Max is literally a writer. And I think it's just such an incredible example of like the story surrounding it, like Max said, was so strong and the character development was so interesting. And the scary sequences were so impressive and thrilling that you kind of end up giving it a pass for that, even though I think because it delivered enough on so many other levels. But yeah, if you really boil down what the impetus for these kids leaving it's like it feels just a little small and a little like B movie, but everything else about the movie is so elevated that you end up being like okay with the experience. And I must say, I think it helped because of the coup de grace, the pièce de
Dude,
resistance, the grand finale,
I mean,
which is
how good did that feel?
it was incredible. And I think maybe justifying the plot to end up being about this one person, this witch, this is the person that is causing all this terrible things to happen to these disappearing kids and these adults acting odd. And the finale is the kids essentially snapping out of it. Our one hero becomes our lead hero who we're rooting for, and empowers all the other kids that have disappeared to then chase the villain. And then the ultimate end is these kids chasing this witch through the suburban towns, almost a la Ferris Bueller's Day Off, going through backyards, hopping
Yeah,
around,
it
only
really does have that feel to it.
only much more violent. And then it ends with, call it 15, 20 kids ripping this witch to shreds, and you see this body come apart. It is
Yeah.
graphic. And yet the structure of the film and the craft of the filmmaker makes it so the entire audience I was in was cheering, and you are seeing some gross shit
Dude,
on screen.
but
But
like,
everyone is so excited for this release that has been
yeah.
built up through the movie that it works.
I mean, it feels truly cathartic because, for one, people who are victims and they get their revenge.
Hmm.
But like thematically, even though it's really messy and it doesn't make any sense, like if this antagonistic force or this witch is the forces that keep us from being able to deal with a school shooting or prevent them. That finally, us, these kids trapped in the basement, while this parasite lies to the police, lies to, your local political leaders, makes victims of teachers and makes victims of parents. That person who's that parasite gets chased, terrified by us, average Americans,
Yeah.
and we rip that person to shreds. I don't care what side of the political spectrum you're on, like that's something you want to do to whatever force that is. But Krager, and I don't even think this is to his discredit, couldn't define what that force is, couldn't
Yeah.
like exactly say this is what that person is, in a way that is universal, and chose not to, which I think is like the best he could do, maybe.
Yeah. Well, dude, okay. Yes. I'm we're now going galaxy brain where we're connecting dots to other podcasts. But
Right.
this is my I guess this is my throwback back to you on Superman, which is like, okay,
Ugh.
James Gunn was trying to make Israel and Palestine and Russia and Ukraine analogies and all that stuff. And again, he couldn't figure it out, and you were super bummed about it. And I was like,
Yeah.
"Oh, James Gunn couldn't do it in 2 hours, but we can't do it in real life. I'm fine with it. You were not." In this, it feels like, and I agree with you here too, is that like you're kind of giving the filmmaker a pass, where it's like he's bringing up important social issues,
Uh-huh.
he's making us think about it, and he kind of doesn't answer the question, but it still makes for a good movie.
But here's the difference. Weapons is on the ground dealing with people who are going through the issue, and the nuances and the difficulties. And it's like, I think ultimately that cop was not a good guy character, but he wasn't just portrayed as an arch villain. And I understand, like, it's Superman, like you have an arch villain or whatever, but like
Yeah.
if you're going to make a movie dealing with the problem of tech billionaires having too much power and their surveillance issues over you, or their ability to create weapons of mass destruction, technically, or digital weapons of mass suffering, and then you go onto the ground of the wars that they are perpetuating because they're war profiteers. And it's like, dude, Israel and the Ukraine are urban warfare. Like the people who are affected by that are everyday people. We
Yeah.
never got to know those people in the
Yeah.
Superman movie.
Hmm.
The Superman movie is about, you know, competing interests in foreign conflicts, and how Superman tries to stop those and is unable to because of the forces in society. That's very interesting. But we spend no time with the people who are going through those conflicts, and therefore it makes the conflicts kind of silly.
I'm waving the white flag on Superman. We don't have to talk about it. But I back to this movie, and I think Zach Kreger in general, and I think what excites me overall, I
Mhm.
love the movie we got. It is so interesting, especially since we talked about the marketing of it being so specific to the plot and to the
Yeah.
premise. And ultimately, now deep in spoilers, realizing that like the premise didn't really pay off the way you and I at least thought it could, and yet still the strength of the story, the strength of the kind of the visceral experience of some of the set pieces was so overpowered everything else, even though it wasn't the original thing that got your butt into the seat. And that to me is why it's such a special movie, and also why I love marketing and movie marketing, and
Yeah.
getting people into theaters to uncover something else that they hadn't expected. So
It really is a cool masterclass in like, how do we make a movie that's about something that's also fun for like going audience to watch, but also convince people to go or trick people into going without them feeling like we sold them short. Like everything about this movie is, I think, a success story for why we're doing this podcast. It's a strong argument for why to go to movies in the first place. It's a big lesson for the rest of filmmakers, just like Sinners was, for like how to make a movie for a broad audience that means something and participates in our culture without feeling like a fucking homework assignment.
amen, brother. Anyway, if you didn't get it, Max and I both say go see
Go
Weapons.
see Weapons. Uh,
What else do you have on your slate? What are you excited to go see?
Dude, I got to erase some medical debt. I got to go see The Toxic Avenger. That's like number one on my list. I went to go see Caught Stealing. I think it's a great time at the movie theater, but I think Toxic Avenger is more exciting to me. It's a wild movie. Peter Dinklage is a fucking treasure. That dude just makes incredible, interesting career choices, and him doing this movie, it says a lot about what he must have read in that script, and I'm very excited to check it out.
I'm interested in a smaller release. This is just a little rom com that's come out in a couple theaters last week called Splitsville. It explores two couples and open relationships and how they are successful and unsuccessful, and it's supposed to be hilarious. It stars Dakota Johnson. I'm really curious to see how it ends up.
Here's our girl Dakota Johnson, another rom com. I'm also super interested in this film. And the fact that it's getting really great reviews is very exciting for me. So I want to check that out too. So next week we're going to do a little forecast on everything that's coming to the movie theaters, things that we're excited about, things we're curious about. We maybe might make some predictions. I'm sure we'll talk for too long. So tune in next week for the fall forecast. Otherwise, we'll see you all at the movies.